talk about specifics.
Allah yehdi tüm cennet.
Bismillah. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is a little special, inshallah.
Got it.
If any of you guys know me, you know that I work with the youth. I work with the youth in Virginia as a youth director. I have many kids under my wings. Some of the youth over here know me very well. I grew up in the town of Manchester. If I were to tell you whenever a bomb is dropped in Gaza or whenever it's dropped in Palestine or West Bank or wherever it is, 30% of it is youth who are dying under the rubble. If I were to tell you that most of it is our women, as our mother and sisters, one thing we're going to do next, for the next 5 minutes, we're going to name out a couple of Palestinian children who have passed away due to these aggressors and oppressive regime. What I want you to do is, and I don't want to hear this ever again, right? Because I'm sick and tired of hearing when people listen on the TV or they speak to each other and family members and they say, imagine if this was my child. Imagine if this was my mother. Imagine if this was my sister. I want you guys to think right now, close your eyes. When we list the name of people who have died, especially namely the children, I want you guys to know that this is your children. Yes. I want you to know that this is your mother. I want you to know that this is your sister. No more of this looking pity on our Palestinian brothers and sisters. They don't want our pity. They're good by themselves. They don't have hope in anyone except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't have, so I want you guys to understand when we list this name, right? Think about your own children. Think about the kids that you brought with you today. Think about the mother that you're holding the hands up. Think about your father. Think about your brothers and sisters, right? And know that this could be us, because oppression in one land is oppression that's coming somewhere else. So my sister and I, we're going to, one by one, we're going to list the name, and I really want you to internalize this. You know, as Muslims, those who are here, that one of the holiest sites to us is Haram, right, in Mecca. The second one is Medina, and the third one is Masjid al-Quds. But you also know, as a Muslim, that the Prophet Muhammad said that the brick and mortar is not as important as the human blood. Do we understand that? So we give more precedence to the blood that is being dropped in the Palestinian land than any other building or brick or mortar. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea. I want you guys to stay silent and just listen to all the names.
I also want you guys to recognize these are just the names of children who died in the month of May 2021. So this past month, in this past massacre. This does not include any other children that have died in the massacres beforehand. It's going to sound long. Imagine all the names that we did not get to today. There are also names, right, of children that were not identified, were not found under the rubble. So this list is not exhaustive, okay? So I just wanted you guys to recognize that this is only the month of May, only what we have been seeing in the last week before this so-called ceasefire.
If you need to close your eyes, whatever you need to do just to internalize these names, okay? Ibrahim Abdullah, 16 years old. Rawan Ala Abul Auf, 17 years old. Tala Ayman Abul Auf, 12 years old. Tawfiq Ayman Abul Auf, 16 years old. Rashid Muhammad Rashid Abu Arra, 16 years old. Rafif Abu Daya, 11 years old. Bilal Abu Hatib, 9 years old. Maryam Abu Hatib, 8 years old. Yamin Abu Hatib, 6 years old. Yusuf Abu Hatib, 11 years old.
Ibrahim Al-Ratinsi, 1 year old. Hala Hussein Al-Rifi, 14 years old. Amir Al-Tanani, 5 years old. Ismail Al-Tanani, 7 years old. Muhammad Al-Tanani, 3 years old. Maryam Al-Tilbani, 3 years old. Zaid Muhammad Al-Tilbani, 5 years old. Muhammad Ahmad Al-Yabar, 17 years old. Hur Al-Zamili, 1 year old. Vima Asalia, 10 years old. Bara Gharabli, 4 years old. Hussein Munir Hussein Hamd, 8 years old.
Yusuf Rafiq Al-Baz, 13 years old. Amir Taysir Al-Amur, 10 years old. Hamada Atiya Abdul Amur, 13 years old. Abdul Rahman Al-Hadidi, 8 years old. Osama Al-Hadidi, 6 years old. Suhaib Al-Hadidi, 13 years old. Yahya Muhammad Sohbi Al-Hadidi, 10 years old. Ahmed Rami Al-Hajauri, 13 years old. Hamza Ali, 12 years old. Amir Ifranji, 9 years old. Dima Ramia al-Ifranji, 15 years old. Mira al-Ifranji, 12 years old.
Lina Isa, 14 years old. Ubaida Jawabre, 17 years old. Abdullah Juda, 12 years old. Yahya Khalife, 14 years old. Muhammad Yusuf Kiwan, 17 years old. Islam Wa'il Fahmi Dar Nasir, 16 years old. Muhammad Ubaid, 17 years old. Saeed Yusuf Muhammad Ode, 16 years old. Bashar Samour, 17 years old. Dua Iyad Sharab, 13 years old. Lina Shreed, 16 years old. Mina Shreed, 3 years old.
Zain Riyad Istintana, 8 years old. Bathaina Obaid, 6 years old. Muhammad Sulaiman, 16 years old. Mahmoud Hamid Tolba, 15 years old. Muhammad Abu Dayya, 1 year old. Fawzia Abu Faraz, 17 years old. Amira Zain Al-Attar, 6 years old. Islam Zain Al-Attar, 8 years old. Muhammad Zain Al-Attar, 1 year old. Hana Shukri Al-Kolak, 14 years old. Muhammad Al-Kolak, 17 years old. Marwan Al-Masri, 6 years old. Adam Al-Tanani, 6 years old. Hur Al-Zamali, 2 years old. Muhammad Yunus Freyhat, 15 years old. Dana Riyad Iskantana, 9 years old. Yahya Riyad Iskantana, 8 years old. If you got tired of listening to this list, then we are tired of Palestinian kids dying. If it hurts you to stand there for 5 minutes to listen to the list of kids, which is an incomplete list, which the kids will still be, because a ceasefire doesn't mean anything. It's funny how in this world that we live in this world, this Western world, liberal world, where we call for freedom and democracy, where we call for liberation, that the children can die from bombs, and when the bombs stop, we happy and celebrate ceasefire. What kind of celebration is this? So don't for a second think that there's not going to be more children under the rubble. There's not going to be more of our mothers and sisters that's going to be filled with blood, drowning in their own blood. Don't for a second think that. So we say, free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. From the river to the sea, Palestinians will be free.
Palestinians will be free.
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
Like I mentioned before, many of you guys brought your children today. Many of you guys take your children out wherever you need to go. You guys are free to go. Come in, come out. You guys enter the masjid. Nobody holds your shoulders. Nobody kicks you. Nobody tears your... I saw, as a Bangladeshi American Muslim, I am freely able to go into Masjid al-Aqsa, and then the Palestinian 13-year-old kid who's on his phone, they take his phone, rip his phone from him, they hold him on his neck, and they kick him out of the masjid. When he enters, he can't enter. When he's leaving, they do so, so he never comes back. So how is it that a Bangladeshi American kid who's going on a tourist for a religious purpose or whatever it is, able to freely walk into the masjid, and the Palestinians can't do that? Free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
Okay, who we have next for speakers, inshallah? You? Oh, it's my sister. Okay, all right. I introduced you to my sister. I don't have to really say anything. She has the voice and I got the looks.
Whoa!
Yikes. Assalamu alaikum. So my name is Naroon, but many of you here know me as Luna. First and foremost, I just want to thank you guys all for being here. It is hot. I know it's like 90 degrees today. Thank you for being out here in the sun. There are people who came all the way from New Haven, an hour away, West Haven. Yeah, so thank you all for being here. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you for staying. Yeah. When I was a senior in college, in 2019, I studied what was framed by my university as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I studied this conflict for an entire year and was privileged enough to be able to travel to Palestine to further my studies. Let me set one thing straight. I did not study a conflict. I did not study a war. I did not study a clash. I studied the military occupation of Palestine because that is what it is. Military occupation, settler colonialism, ethnic cleansing, genocide. I know there are a lot of adults here in the audience. Young people, educate your parents on what these words might mean. The language, and a lot of our parents lived through colonialism themselves. They come from countries that were colonized by the West, okay? So this is a struggle. Oppressed for one is oppressed for all, right? So the language that you use when discussing this issue, this global human rights issue, is incredibly important. Because Israeli and American propaganda have spent years trying to brainwash its constituents into perceiving this as both sides. There is no both sides. Saying both sides implies a balance of power. It implies that there is equal footing on either end. We know, is there a balance of power in Israel and Palestine?
No.
Absolutely not. Nothing about this is equal, and it has never been since the Nakba of 1948. There is the oppressor and the oppressed. There is the occupier and the occupied. There is the aggressor and a person who is aggressed against. By claiming to see this as both sides, or claiming to stand neutral, you are standing with the oppressor. We know that Israel is a racist, xenophobic, and apartheid state. The Zionist project and the state of Israel upholds a system of segregation and discrimination that routinely, over and over and over, strips Palestinians of their homes, their identity, and their dignity. Israel has complete control over Palestinian water supply, routinely cutting off water when Palestinians resist as a form of punishment. They control all Palestinian land, even the occupied Palestinian territories. That is why it's called occupied Palestinian territories. We know that all of the land is Palestinian land. From the river to the sea is Palestine. But it has complete control. Israel has complete control. They are routinely displacing, stealing Palestinian homes, displacing entire families one at a time. As Erna had mentioned, we are seeing this currently in Sheikh Jarrah, but this is not the first town, nor will it be the last. Even in cities within occupied Palestinian territories, there are entire roads that Palestinians themselves cannot drive or walk on. I saw this myself in the city of Al-Khalil. Many of you might know it as Hebron. Think about that we've been brainwashed to call Palestinian the cities the Jewish names, right? But it is Al-Khalil, not Hebron, where there are over 60 roads completely blocked off by Israeli military. And the roads that are open have checkpoints every few kilometers. That's me. That's if we walk from here down to Manchester High School, you would have to go through several checkpoints, right? Showing that you have your ID. If you don't have an ID, the punishment ranges from jail to death. Jail to death. There are 12 kilometers of roads in Al-Khalil that Palestinians cannot drive on, and 1.5 kilometers of roads that they cannot walk through in their own city. Raise your hand if you're from Manchester. Half of us would not be able to drive home today. Half of us would not be able to walk home today because they do not have free access, free mobility in their own city. Yet, on the same roads, I myself saw IDF soldiers going for a morning jog. Israeli settlers going for a morning jog. While there are Palestinians that cannot go from one home to their aunt's house, to their brother's house, to their sister's house. In Al-Khalil, I also met Farhan. Farhan was an elementary schooler who loved going to school. The Israeli military, one day for no reason, closed the gate to his neighborhood, essentially imprisoning him and his entire family. So, because he loves school, because he cares for school, he did not want to miss a day of school, he jumped the gate. 100 IDF soldiers were sent after Farhan. 100 soldiers for one child. They evacuated the entire school and they shut down Al-Khalil until they were able to find him. When they found him, they beat him blue and black. An elementary schooler. One of the most evil things about this occupation is the way that it treats Palestinian children with no regard to human life, as you just saw the number of names we left off. When I visited the YMCA in Bet Suhur, it's a town in Bethlehem, we met with Dr. Nadu Abu Shad. He's a psychologist who works with children that have extreme post-traumatic stress disorder because of the severe trauma due to ethnic cleansing, due to genocide, kids who are living through bombs. He taught us, I don't know if any of you have heard this, the breaking bones policy. It was a military order given by the Israeli government to, instead of using live ammunition, use large sticks to break the bones of children so that they can be physically disabled for the rest of their life. That means they can no longer physically resist. This was a government policy told to all soldiers to break the bones of children. These are the policies that Israel, the Middle East's only democracy, upholds. Only democracy bullshit. Excuse my language.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
One of the most important things we can do right now is to amplify Palestinian voices. Palestinians are constantly silenced by international communities, by the media. A lot of you are posting on social media. You see your normal posts get 1,000 views, your posts on Palestine get 100, right? That's digital silencing and erasure, right? They are silenced by Israeli apartheid. You have to continue sharing Palestinian stories and narratives. In order to amplify these voices, I want to share some direct quotes from some of the professors. Stanley mentioned Mazim Khumsiya, Professor Khumsiya. I met with him, I studied with him, an amazing person. Some professors, activists, authors, and medical workers that I met in Palestine. This is their reality, and these are direct quotes from Palestinians.
Everybody report, put it on Snapchat.
Israel is dragging us to violence. They are victorious. You cannot beat them because they are the biggest power in the Middle East. Yet at the same time, they are shouting insecurity. They are ethnically cleansing us systematically. Dr. Nada Abu Ashad. Israel presents itself to the world as a democracy, but it's a very racist when it comes to the indigenous people of this land. We are in a survival struggle with the Israeli government. All of their plans are against the benefit of the people in this area. This is from Sheikh Yusuf of Wadi Nam, a village in the Negev, which is controlled by Israel. These Bedouin villages are not recognized by Israel. They are not provided with schools, clinics, electricity, or water, despite the fact that I saw electricity lines going over the village to the next Israeli city. Another quote, every few months we have a round of tension, conflict, and no stability. The people of Gaza are looking for stability and dignity. At the end of the day, ordinary people are suffering. From Kamal Baoud, an activist in Gaza, the world's largest open-air prison. Another quote, the Nakba is ongoing. It did not end in 1948 or 1967. Maybe forgetting would be easy if the injustice stopped, but it has not. They tell us to move on. Where to? And how? From the director of the Rawad Arts and Cultural Center in Aida refugee camp. And my last quote, the world's silence and the US's ultimate support for Israel makes our death very easy. The world should take responsibility. The way they helped create this occupation. I'm going to say it again. The world should take responsibility the way they helped create this occupation. They need to end it. At least recognize our rights. Manal Tamimi, she's a mother and an activist from the village of Nabi Saleh. I want to end by echoing Manal. It is our responsibility, our duty, to work towards the liberation of our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Our tax dollars are funding this military occupation. Your tax dollars. The U.S. sends $3.8 billion to Israel every single year. So our work is here, in our communities, in our country. Our work is lobbying against Israeli support, boycotting Israeli goods, calling our state representatives and demanding that our tax dollars are not sent for Israeli occupation or voting them out.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea,
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free. You need to have conversations with your coworkers, your outer circles, your friends. You cannot be scared to talk about Palestine. Educate them and educate yourself. There is a sheet that's going to go around. It breaks up the common misconceptions on Palestine, and on the back, there are people to follow. There are books to read to gain a deeper understanding. The last thing I will say, and I wasn't planning on saying this, but there are a lot of people here from my community who watch me grow up, lots of uncles, aunts, right? When I was in Palestine, I know the brutality of the IDF because I was held hostage by the IDF myself. My parents don't even know this story because it was too traumatic for me to tell them. And honestly, after this, I don't know if they'll ever let me leave the house again. But the Israeli officers sat by me with their gun faced toward me for 8 hours. Right? Why? Because I have a Muslim name. Why? Because they asked me, where is your father from? I said, Bangladesh. So if I, like my brother said, a Bangladeshi American, if I can be interrogated, if I can be traumatized, if I can be harassed verbally by the Israeli defense, imagine what they do to the Palestinians that live there every single day, day in and day out. I was traumatized by that one instance. There are Palestinians who are traumatized every day. We also need to talk about their mental health. Those who survive, how are they surviving? How are we taking care of their health after experiencing all this trauma? So we must keep protesting. We must keep marching. We must keep posting. And we must keep fighting until we see a free Palestine. Thank you so much.
Free Palestine! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free!
You guys are probably so sick of hearing me. I'm sorry. I'm just going to introduce the next two speakers. First, we have Francesca. I actually just met Francesca this week yesterday. I already feel so bonded to her. She grew up in Italy, where solidarity with Palestine runs among the left. While studying in Singapore, she started the first university-based Palestine solidarity group in Singapore, and upon moving to New Haven, she's been organizing in the city. So if you were at the New Haven protest yesterday, Francesca was one of the organizers. Come on up, Francesca.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming out. It's so good to see you all here. It's so good to go from one protest to the other and then to the next and to the next and to the next. I asked Nunua to introduce me by talking about the group I started in Singapore because I want you all to know that you have the power to do something. And I'm telling this especially to the youth. If you're in high school, if you're in college, you can start a Palestine solidarity group. If you feel like you don't know enough, you know enough. This is reject any fabricated nuance or fabricated complexity. You don't need to know every single UN resolution. You know enough to do this. If you feel like you're alone, that you are the only one who cares about this, you are not. I guarantee to you there's someone else who's thinking about it. Talk to people in other Students for Justice in Palestine chapters in your state or in your area. Talk to the National Students for Justice in Palestine group. They will put you in touch. They will give you resources. You can do it. We're the only people who have the power to do it. We know how complicit our politicians are. It needs to come from us. We are the ones who push them. We are the ones that can make them change their stance. Or we will vote them out. But it needs to start from us. It's not going to come from them because they're getting a fat check out of their complicity with Israel. So Stan has already talked a little bit about complicity by Connecticut politicians. I want to tell you a little bit more. I want to give you some quotes. This is from Rosa DeLauro. She is a Connecticut congressional representative for New Haven. She said, the strength of the United States relationship with Israel cannot be understated. They are amongst our most valuable allies and our bond is unshakable. Shame! 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 John Larson, has also a Connecticut congressional representative, has said, Israel has long been our closest ally in the region, and no daylight will ever come between our countries. Shame! 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 Do you all know what planes were bombing Gaza last week? Our friend in Gaza told us that those were F-35 planes that were bombing her. They were bombing her neighborhood, her family. Those are the planes that killed her pregnant cousin. Those are American planes. Do you know what the engines for these planes are produced? Does anyone know? Shout it out.
Connecticut!
Connecticut. Connecticut is the exclusive producer of the engines for F-35 planes. John Larson said that Connecticut has a proud history when it comes to supporting our nation's defense. I call this a shameful history.
Shame.
Shame! 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 The engines for those planes are produced by Pratt & Whitney, a Connecticut-based manufacturing company. And John Larson, by his own words, this is from his website, I'm not making it up, this is what he tells his constituents about himself. He said that he has led the effort in Congress to ensure that Pratt & Whitney remains the sole supplier of engines for the F-35 and continues to fight to safeguard the production of the aircraft in Connecticut. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I want you to know this occupation, it's not complicated. It's not a complicated issue. It's not irrational. It's very rational. People are making money off it. People make money out of the most repulsive issues in our world. People make money off war. They make money off occupation. They make money off dispossession of people from their homes. They make money out of colonialism. People are making money off their support for Israel. It's not complicated. It's not irrational. It's not illogical. It's very logical. They're getting a fat check out of it.
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine.
I also want you to know that Connecticut Congressional Representative Joe Courtney and Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal, they both co-sponsored the Israel Anti-Boycott Act. This was a piece of legislation that thankfully was eventually declared unconstitutional and did not pass. But had it passed, it was a proposed anti-BDS law that was designed to allow U.S. states to prosecute people who advocated for a boycott of Israel. This law would have barred U.S. citizens from supporting boycotts against Israel, including the illegal settlements in the West Bank, illegal by international law, and violators would be subjected to a minimum civil penalty of $250,000 minimum, and a maximum criminal penalty of $1 million and 20 years in prison. Do you realize how shameful and insane this is? 20 years in prison for supporting the boycott of an apartheid state. This is what Connecticut politicians want for you. 20 years in prison for refusing to be complicit with an occupation.
Shame.
Shame! 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 So, we want Connecticut congressional representatives to end their shameful complicity with Israeli apartheid, to support House Bill 2590 that other people have already spoken about, or we will vote them out. We voted them in, we will vote them out. This is your power. You have the power to do this. They're not going to do it by themselves. It's okay. I also want you to know that the Hartford and Stamford police departments have sent delegates to Israel to attend trainings. This is shame. This is called the Deadly Exchange. It's an exchange program, well, several exchange programs between US-based police departments who go to Israel. They train with Israeli security firms. They train with the IDF. And then they come back here and they apply the same strategies against Black Americans, against indigenous Americans, against poor people, against people who use drugs, people who are homeless. They are subjected to the same anti-terrorism, the same brutality that Palestinians are subjected to. When we say that no one is free unless we're all free, it's not rhetorical, it's material, it's real. Those people train in Israel and come back and apply the same tactics to you. That's why we need to fight for the freedom of Palestinians, because our freedom depends on it. Former New Haven Police Chief Anthony Campbell went on a trip to Israel in 2018. When he came back, he said that this was, I'm quoting, by far one of the most profound and life-changing experiences I've ever had. And he said that being in Israel and going through that training made him rethink policing practices in the US. He said If it were up to me, every police chief in the country should have to take this counter-terrorism seminar. Shame! 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 And those are just some of the police departments that have been documented to train in Israel. Imagine how many more there are in Connecticut, in this country, that we don't know anything about, because they keep it secret, because they don't want people like you to fight back against it. So I'm just going to leave you by saying, I want you all to leave today with one idea in mind about what you're going to do next. Are you going to go to the next protest? Are you going to start a student group in your school or in your college? Are you going to call your representatives? Tell them that you're ashamed of them. Tell them that you will vote them out. What is the next thing you are going to do for Palestine? I want you to leave today with your next idea in mind, because we can't stop here. The mobilization we've seen in the past few weeks is historical, but we have to keep pushing. Palestine is still occupied. People are still getting dispossessed from their homes. The blockade against Gaza is still happening. We need to go home and we need to think about our next move, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next, until Palestine is free. Thank you so much. Free, free Palestine!
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 Free, free Palestine!